Hello, welcome back to Oliver's Greenhouse. Now it's been ages since I've done any content. I've been super busy, and I mean insane recently. Obviously, being full-time dad slash major breadwinner, you know, the main source of income in the family, there's very little time left over in my day to do any sort of filming, so I sort of rely on weekends to do a number of videos and then edit them over the next coming few days so I can sort of upload them throughout the week. But I was at a wedding this weekend, I had a prior engagement the other weekend. I've just been so busy. Although on a positive note, I have left an entire day this weekend just dedicated for making some videos. It's been a bit of a double-edged sword really, having this little sabbatical, because what's actually allowed me to do is come up with some more ideas of some videos, of some content to make for you guys. It's also given the plants time to develop and do things. I'm very excited about some of the acquisitions I've made, and we're going to be having a really in-depth look at those this weekend. I've got lots of new flower spikes, I've got lots of new flowers, so we've got some really cool things to look at as well. There's loads of new growth. Everything's just really responding well to that drop in temperature. And the greenhouse just looks fantastic, so we're going to be doing a really long tour in the daylight, so I'm not here filming in front of the shade for the windows and my work light, which is like looking at the centre of the sun, but it's the only way that I can get any sort of decent image quality out of the phone. We'll be getting a new bit of recording equipment after Christmas in the January sales, which is going to improve these videos no end. It's going to be semi-professional setup, so it's going to be really good, and it's also going to give me the kick up the backside to really get on and sort of improve this channel by making better content for you guys. So, right, anyway, the purpose of this video, okay, so I've sort of devised sort of an interim video between now and the end of the weekend when I eventually get round to editing some of that footage I'm going to record. I've been bimbling on about it in a number of tours, but these are my Darlingtonia, or my Cobra Lily seedlings, okay. Now I planted these earlier in the year, very quick germination rate, most of them germinated. They went in the greenhouse, they got nuked, a lot of them didn't like it, so we've got a lot of dead little seedlings in here. But there's also a lot of really healthy ones. Now we've had that drop in temperature, these guys have really taken off, and so I keep walking past them, I'm like, I've got to do something about them. So I said we'd do it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So what we're going to do basically is we'll have a look at the medium we're going to be using to pot these guys into. They're not fussy. They'll pretty much grow in anything, whether it's moss or peat moss. They even grow in basically mulch under pine trees and stuff in their native habitat. So they're not super fussy. So what we'll do is we'll have a talk about the media, have a look about the potting technique we're going to use. And what we're going to do basically is just wash all of this old media off them, because they're still only small plants, they only have tiny root systems. Wash all this media off, and then we'll plant maybe 2 to 3 plants per pot, but sort of evenly spaced out, and give them some fresh media, which I'm sure they're going to really enjoy. So what I'll do is, I'll get all those bits together, move the tripod down over there, set some lights up so we can see what we're doing, and we'll start potting these up. Okay, so the best thing to do is probably just have a quick chat about the media we're going to be using. In this tray, in this bowl, I've got what I consider to be the standard carnivorous plant mix. It's just simply Irish peat moss, about 60%, and about 40% perlite in here, or small granule perlite. This is dry at the moment. I haven't wetted it. It's just easier to mix all of the particulates together whilst it's dry, and then wet it later. It just makes life so much easier. That's just the standard carnivorous plant mix. Obviously the Irish peat moss, or peat moss, is becoming harder and harder to come by, because there is obviously an ecological impact of harvesting it. I mean, this is literally decayed sphagnum moss, so it's this stuff but decayed, and it takes hundreds of years for it to break down to form this stuff. And obviously in the process of breaking down, it locks up a lot of pollutants, such as greenhouse gases and stuff like that. So it locks them away in the soil, and then harvesting it sort of releases that. It's like a carbon cycle basically, or is the carbon cycle. So there is an ecological impact in it, But the trouble is, carnivorous plants just won't grow in anything else. They used to harvest loads of this stuff. You used to mix it into heavy clay soils to aerate it and basically improve the growing environment. So it's not quite so anaerobic for plant roots. There's a little bit of sticks, probably a bit of heather, root, because obviously where you find peat moss bogs or peat bogs, you've usually got heather. So that's what that is. That's what we're going to be using. Like I said before, carnivorous plants won't really grow in anything else, so you've got to be using that. There are some newer products coming through which don't include peat moss. I haven't trialled them, I haven't used them, and I've heard there's still sort of mixed results. So the verdict's sort of out on those, but this is what we're going to be using. So that's going to form the base of our media. That's what I pop most things up into. So Drosera capensis, Drosera venusta, things like that would go in there. Also my nepenthes get a mix. There's a lot rockier mix and there's a lot more sphagnum moss in it. But my nepenthes also go in that. And then in this tray here, this is basically, this was a mix I was using to grow Drosophilum, because I've got some Drosophilum plants at work, which I also find quite easy to cultivate. They're in the big greenhouse at work. Should probably do a video on those. So this is a much higher concentration of washed aquarium gravel and washed horticultural sand. So no sodium in this lot. And that's basically, that is my Drosophilum mix. But this is some left over. So what I was going to do is actually for the Darlingtonia, because they like quite a lot of a free flowing media, what I was actually going to do is combine I don't know, a fair amount of this to sort of like to swell this mix up, but still retain that free flowing sort of media which I was after, especially for these little seedlings. So this is going to get reconstituted and used in the media we're going to be using today. And the third thing we're going to be using, this is my sphagnum moss, which I grow in the greenhouse. What we're going to do is just be cutting a few of the tips out of this. Very easy to grow, just like this. Started off as only a few tiny bits in here and is soon taken off with very little help from me. I don't know whether you can see it here, there's actually Drosera Adelaide root cuttings here. I cut some of the roots off when I repotted my Drosera Adelaide, lay them down, let the sphagnum grow off across, and then they've sprouted. So I've actually got to take some of these plantlets out of here at some point, but not today. We're just going to work around them. There's one over here, there's one here, one here. I'll hold them up to the camera so you can see. It's quite interesting the difference in coloration compared to the one that's growing in the lighter, the brighter conditions, because that's gone almost like a maroon garnet sort of colour. All I do is I'll hold it up and you'll be able to see it. I'll have to refocus the camera though. Hopefully you can see those guys in there now. So you've got one, I'll put a bit of light on it as well, it might help. There we go, so we've got a few of these little plantlets in here we'll have to work around. That shouldn't be too much of an issue. And what we're going to do with this is just refocus you again. I've turned autofocus off, otherwise you find it flashing around all over the place. It does my head in, so. Also makes the videos look awful, so you have to just deal with a little bit of screen wobble for the moment. So yeah, this is what we're going to be using to top dress it. They like growing in sphagnum moss anyway, so we'll use the mix I've just discussed with you, and then we'll top dress the plantlets or the surface of the growing media with some of this, and this just goes like wildfire. It grows really, really well in the greenhouse. Just keep it down low on the floor where it's not too bright. Keep it nice and moist, and it just off it goes. I mean, it's a vascular plant, but it doesn't really need roots. It just grows along the ground, or sort of flops and falls all over the place. So I'll show you how I plant that, because there is a little certain technique to making that a little bit more success than it would be if you just left it. So the next step is to move them out of the way and get on with actually washing this old media off. I'm literally going to submerge this whole thing in a pot of rainwater. They're pretty rugged, they're going to be okay with some submersion, and then we'll split out what's actually there and what's not. So I'll go and get ready for that, and I'll turn you back on and we'll start the next stage. Okay, so hopefully you can see this all okay. This is just some water out of the water butt outside the back of the house. This is what I use for my orchids, my carnivorous plants. It's just got a bit where I sort of wash my hands off in it. And I've got some A4 paper over here. So what I'm going to do is simply submerge these in here, break up the old potting media, so that'll turn the water a horrible colour, and then pick out those which are still alive or which are the most viable. So it should be quite straightforward. And then I'll place them over here, and then we'll know how many plants we've actually got to pot up afterwards. So you should come apart quite easily. Like I said, they're only small still, so they shouldn't really have much in the way of roots on them yet. There you go. Just popping them under the water there. And just gently rubbing the media to make it all fall apart. This water is unbelievably cold. So I'm not sure, we're left with a little disc and stuff. I can see there are some roots here. I'm not sure whether it's the moss holding it together or if there's just a sea of roots. We'll just keep working at it. Hopefully it'll all come apart. So I'm starting to see some roots in there now. It seems to be working. It's just a matter of patience. Just pulling the old media apart, just ever so gently. Washing the particles of peat out. In hindsight, what I should have really done is put some of this water in earlier, so at least it's room temperature. It's absolutely freezing. Okay, there's almost like a little there's a little transient line between down the middle of the media there, so I'm just going to pull those bits apart like that. Just pop them under water, that won't make any difference to them, they'll be fine. So here's our first plantlet here that looks like it's going to be easy enough to separate out. They're two quite close to each other there. I'm using very little force, I'm literally just teasing them apart. So in here is this plant's roots, just pop them under water again, they'll be fine. Now Darlingtonia really like very cold water. They grow around like little rills and springs on the edge of mountains at relative altitude, a reasonable altitude. So they like to have their roots constantly cool. And if if the roots or the potting media starts to heat up, you get root death, and then the plants sort of wither and just disappear. So that's one little plantlet out of this lot. Don't worry about submerging, it's not going to have any real negative impact on them whatsoever. Not for this brief period of time for which they're under. There's another little viable one there. Now these spread by stolons, so they produce little runners. These little adventitious roots which spread out into the surrounding soil horizons and pop up as new little plants. I actually grow some of these outside in a butler sink at the front of the house. And they sort of produce runners quite regularly and pop up all over the place. So we've got a couple here. They don't have particularly rugged roots, they're quite small, white, easily broken. So if I'm just left with a little nugget like that, so obviously the majority of its roots are proliferating in this little nugget of soil, I'll just keep that to one side, almost like a plug. Seedling, and that'll be fine. There's another one here. It won't take them long to send their roots off into the surrounding with the new potting media. I always find that carnivorous plants respond really well to fresh potting media, so I pot them on and then they really take off and seem a lot happier. It's almost, I know this is a relatively nutrient-free potting media, which is why they have evolved in such a way as to harness, the flying morsels of nitrogen, i.e. insects and stuff, because the growing media which they're growing in has got little to no nitrogen or any of the macronutrients which plants rely on for growth. However, saying that, it seems like a fresh bit of potting media and everything seems to take off like wildfire. So they obviously do respond well to some sort of fertilisation, even if it's in the form of just simple fresh media. Always get lots more new growth. So that guy there's come apart quite well. You might not be able to see his roots very easily. If I hold him against the dark water, you might be able to see it. There's his little tap root there. There's a couple of plants here sort of married together. I'm not going to tease them apart too much. It's just going to be an absolute faff, I think, unless he wants to come apart, which I don't think he does. I know he does. There we go. So that's two little tiny plants there, and then this guy's come apart completely. So we've got his tap root here, and the pitchers on top. So have to be extra careful with him. We don't want to keep him out in the light for too long. It's very detrimental to their health. Roots aren't meant to photosynthesize on carnivorous plants. It's not orchids we're dealing with here. There's another little plant there. There's also a little weed in there as well. I need to get that out. We don't want that. Anything competing with them. There's a little one there. I'm not going to plant them all separately. It'll be too much of a. I'll just have too many of them. So what I'll do is I'll plant a number of them. Do sort of like 3 or 4 plants per pot. You can see this at a fair bit here. Just break these off. You can see these brown ones in the middle here. This is what happens from overheating. That one's come apart quite nicely. It gets too hot and they just can't handle it. Like I said, they grow at altitude and have constantly cold flowing water over their roots. So as soon as the greenhouse gets anything above sort of like 25, 26 degrees in there, they start sulking and end up looking really sad, which is what's happened unfortunately with these seedlings. It's just lucky that those that have survived have pulled through okay. Just going to get rid of some of the old pictures. There we go. Don't be too shy with them. They are, after all, pretty rugged little plants. There we go, last one. Oh, there we go. This is the last little seedling here. It's quite a decent size. We want to keep it. I think it's mainly the moss holding the media at this height together, rather than they have very few roots on them. So yeah, I don't want to pull that bit apart too much. Just pull him out. There we go. Right. What I'll do is I'll wash my hands. Make sure there's nothing else left in here. No, that's all of them. Wash my hands, chuck this away, and then we'll have a quick count up and have a look at how many plants we've ended up with. Okay, so this is what we've broken it up into. We'll have a quick look and see how many we've got in here. I don't want to put them on in paper, I don't want to dry the roots out. So just bring this pot over here. This is one we washed up, just washed it out outside. So we've got, there's about 2 in that one. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We've got about 14 plants there, so that's not too bad. Out of those, considering all the ones that died off, that's I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'll do is I'll get some of this potting media, the potting media we discussed earlier. Dry it, well it's dry at the moment, but I'll have to wet it, so get this wet and divide some pots out. What I'd like to be using these white pots because they help to reflect the heat of the sun. These are just ones I've collected, old orchids or other plants have come in them, they'd be fine for this. But I haven't got enough of these, obviously, so what I was going to do is I was going to just put up into some of these smaller black pots as well. I'll work out how many we're going to need, and then we'll pot these guys up. Okay, so just clear a bit of a space here. I've got a spoon there. Shut that in the sink. There we go. So what I've done is I've gone out and wetted the soil. I haven't saturated it, so I've just made it damp so we can work with it, otherwise it's just a nightmare. Also, we don't want to be putting the seedlings' roots into anything that's going to dry them out, because obviously that will cause damage. So we've got some of that, that's ready to rock and roll. We've got some of these containers. These white ones I'm going to use preferably to start off with, and then I'll stand them once they're full in this pot here, so they're not leaking fluid out. Harry's trusty beach spade is being used again because it's just ideal for this. So it's not going to be particularly interesting. What I'll do is I won't talk during this bit, I'll just get on with it. Fill these pots up, and then before we plant the actual seedlings up and top dress with the sphagnum moss, I'll give you some information about Darlingtonia. their growing environments, how to propagate them, what they don't like, what they do like, and it'll be more interesting than just watching me fill pots full of soil. Okay, so off we go. Okay, so that's all the pots filled up, ready to rock and roll. What we'll do is we'll go on and plant these little plantlets in the tops of these. Like I said before, this is only moist at the moment. It's not wet. These guys, they will need to grow them in about 1 inch of water. So you keep the water up to about this sort of line on the pots, because they really like being constantly wet. Now they can actually take quite a lot of heat, and they like direct sunlight, but what they don't like is warm rooting environment. They really will not tolerate it. Where they grow in the natural environment, these guys actually come from Northern California and Oregon and places like that, where they grow in bogs and seeps. There's always like a bit like with Drosera regia, there's always running cold water through the rooting systems. So if you imagine the plants growing at this height here, the water's flowing through the soil horizons below and trickling off the side of the mountain. So there's a siren going past outside. So that's why they are used to maintaining a cold rooting environment, why they won't tolerate any even an increase of a few degrees. So yeah, like I said before, they're a carnivorous plant. They come from California, Northern California. They are considered to be quite rare. There's not many of them left, mainly through the loss of habitat, really. And they can be quite tricky to grow. I know a lot of people really struggle with them. I'm no expert. I certainly don't profess to be. I mean, look at the size of mine. They're this big so far. Do you know what I mean? So I would not consider myself to be an expert. I have more mature plants, but they grow outside permanently. They're in a bog I made out of a butler sink, so they're on my drive, and they seem very, very happy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, bear in mind the length of the taproot here. I'm just going to insert these just down, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab very gently the end of the taproot, and not so much grab as sort of coax downwards into this hole like that. And then what I'm going to do is just use the flat side of these just to push the new media. Being careful, you mustn't snap the taproot, otherwise you just kill the plant. Just to firm the soil in around it. We can bring some more over here as well, just like that. Part of the reason why we're going to be transplanting so many into these pots as well, because there is a good chance we're going to lose some of these. So we want to make sure that each pot is, just a ratio of numbers basically, so that we've got a reasonable chance of at least having getting a few mature plants out of these pots. Once again, just being very careful just to grab that root, take it down inside, and then just backfill, trying to keep the plant central to where we're applying pressure. Gently backfill. Now my experience is that carnivorous plants are pretty rugged. You think about the growing environment these guys come from. They grow in, particularly in hospitable locations, where there's not a lot of food. It's anaerobic, by which I mean there's no oxygen in the rooting environment. You've got just decomposing leaf matter, whether it be pine needles or sphagnum moss. There's no real nutrient value to the soil in which they grow. So they've developed, the ability to capture their prey and to therefore gain nitrogen by dissolving the bodies of their prey. As a result of that, they seem to be able to put up with a lot of, people. I think people are slightly too precious about them. And warranted, there are certain types of carnivorous plants which are just particularly finicky. The king sundew, Drosera regia, is one of those. Some of the tropical sundews as well can be really, really fussy. Tuberous sundews are almost impossible. If you grow those things successfully, I salute you, because I've tried and I can't grow them. But the things like Darlingtonia, I don't think, as long as you remember to keep the rooting environment cool, I don't think they need to be a big hassle or particularly difficult in any way, shape or form. You just need to remember those key points. Cool running water, a bit like a Dissa orchid. I've seen some people actually install pond pumps and stuff and have water just flowing over, a bit like Dissas. Those orchids, well, it's another same technique you can use for those. Just have a tray and just have cool water circulating over the rooting system of the plants constantly. And that seems to work really, really well at keeping them cool and keeping the plants happy. That's that one there done. So it's about 4 in that one. I'm probably not going to put any more in that. What I'll do is I'll shut up now and I'll get on with these, and you can watch it in high speed. Okay, so there we have it. I'll switch back over on the 4K so you can see a bit more detail for this next bit and of what we've done. It's pretty simple really. I mean, I haven't really been uber gentle with them or taken any major precautions. I've just used classic sort of like just pot it up, just get it in there, and hopefully that'll be fine. Now I was going to top dress with sphagnum. I'm not going to do that now because actually, considering these are probably going to sulk from the amount of disturbance they've just had. I mean, that's only fair, really. They've been taken out of their, the environment, the only environment they've known since the radical first appeared, from whence they were just a seed. So I'm expecting them to sulk slightly anyway. So I think if we put sphagnum moss on them, it'll outgrow them and then end up being smothered, or have to constantly end up cutting the sphagnum moss back, which is going to be a pain in the backside. So these are going to go straight out to the greenhouse now. Into a tray holding about 1 inch of rainwater, and hopefully they're going to take off and we're going to have a few more plants, or hopefully something a bit more mature. That'd be nice, because these are stunning plants when they're fully grown. Anyone who grows these will vouch for that. They really are fascinating looking plant and a really awesome addition to any collection. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate all the support you guys have given over the last sort of like 3 or 4 months. And what I'm going to do with these is, when I reach 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to give some of these away. I'll run a competition, and hopefully these will have all taken off and have done really, really well. What I'll do is I'll actually unpop them. And actually post them to some of you, whoever wins the competition. So I'll do like 1,000 subscriber giveaway. So that's only 600 more subscribers to get, which should hopefully give these plants a bit of a chance to grow to our semi-adulthood. So thanks again for watching. If you like these videos, don't forget to give us a like, and if you want to see more, subscribe. Thanks for watching.